My beloved child, something happened last night. A truth was spoken in a room where no one expected it. A truth so quiet, so deep, so heavy with feeling that it changed the air before it changed a single life. Your soulmate stood before their family and said your name with a kind of care that made the whole room go still. Not because they were loud. Not because they were dramatic. But because the words were real. And real words have a way of shaking even the strongest walls. You'll understand soon. The family did not laugh. They did not interrupt. They did not brush it aside like something small. They looked at each other the way people do when a hidden door opens inside a house they thought they knew. Some were shocked. Some were quiet. One person even leaned back as if they had to sit with the weight of what they just heard. And your soulmate, for the first time in a long time, did not hide. They did not soften the truth. They did not turn away from it. They let it stand there, fully alive. Another layer, what they said about you was not a small thing. It was not casual. It was not spoken like a passing thought. It was spoken like something they had carried for too long in a chest that was getting tired of silence. They told their family that you changed them. That you made them feel seen in a way they had never explained out loud. That your name had become tied to their peace. Their regret, and their hope all at once. And when those words landed, the room changed. You can almost feel that room now, can you not? The biggest truth is still hidden, because the confession was not only about love. It was about fear. It was about the long road between knowing and saying. It was about a heart that kept waiting for the perfect moment and then realized the perfect moment never comes wrapped in comfort. So last night, they chose honesty over pride. They chose your name over silence. They chose to face the people who knew them best and say, without hiding, that what they feel for you is not a small feeling at all. You'll understand soon, and here is the part that made everyone freeze. They did not speak like someone begging to be understood. They spoke like someone finally telling the truth after carrying it through too many lonely nights. Their voice shook, but it did not break. Their hands trembled, but they did not stop. That is the kind of moment that makes a family go quiet. Not because they were prepared. Because they were not. Because truth has a sound, and once it enters a room, no one can pretend they did not hear it. Another piece, your soulmate told them that every time your name came up, they felt a pull they could not explain away. They said there were nights when they stared at the ceiling and tried to call it confusion, only to realize it was much deeper than confusion. They said they were done pretending your absence did not hurt. And then they said the line that stunned everyone most of all. They said, "I think I have loved them longer than I admitted to myself." When those words were spoken, nobody knew where to look first. The next part is still waiting. For a moment, even the air seemed to stop moving. That is what happens when a hidden feeling becomes a spoken one. The room does not stay the same. The family may have expected a story. They may have expected a confession of admiration or regret. But this was more than that. This was a surrender. A soft one. A painful one. A brave one. And once it was said, it could not be put back inside the heart again. Not ever in the same way. You'll understand soon. Your soulmate also told them something even more tender. They said that being away from you had not made the feeling disappear. It had made it clearer. Time did not erase it. Silence did not weaken it. Distance only gave it more shape. They said the hardest part was not missing you. The hardest part was knowing exactly what was felt and still being too afraid to hold it up to the light. That is a lonely kind of ache. The kind that teaches a soul how to tremble and still keep going. Another layer, now listen carefully, because this is where the heart of the story begins to open. Their family did not all react the same way. One person stared in disbelief. Another lowered their eyes as if they were remembering old signs they had missed. Someone else finally asked the question that had been waiting in the room the whole time. Why now? And your soulmate did not answer fast. They took a breath. They looked down. Then they said the truth that made everything deeper than anyone expected. The biggest truth is still hidden. They said they had reached the point where pretending was no longer possible. They said they had tried to move on, tried to stay busy, tried to act unchanged, but their heart kept returning to you like a tide returning to shore. They said there was no peace in pretending. Only delay. Only ache. Only the same unspoken truth growing heavier with every month. And once the room heard that, it stopped being a family conversation and became something much more sacred. You'll understand soon. There was one person in that room who understood before the others did. Not because they knew the ending. Because they recognized the look in your soulmate's eyes. They had seen that look before in people who are one step away from changing their whole life. That person did not speak at first. They just watched. They watched your soulmate stand there with a cracked voice and a steady heart, saying what should have been said long ago. And maybe that silence was its own kind of answer. Another piece, but the story did not end there. It never ends where the first confession lands. Because when a soul is finally honest, another truth always follows behind it. Your soulmate admitted something that made the whole family exchange glances again. They said they had tried to stay away for reasons they thought were wise at the time. Reasons that seemed strong when fear was in charge. But the farther they went, the more they understood that distance had not solved anything. It had only made the feeling more honest. Another layer, and then came the pause. The kind of pause that carries more weight than a speech. They stood there, quiet now, with their family waiting and their own heart beating too loudly to ignore. It was in that silence that they realized something they had never wanted to face. Love does not always arrive when life is easy. Sometimes it arrives when everything is complicated. Sometimes it arrives after mistakes, after delay, after pride has already spent its last excuse. And once that becomes clear, there is no easy way back. The next part is still waiting. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks, only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. After that, the room felt different. Not fixed. Not finished. Different in the way a long-held breath changes a face when it finally leaves the body. Their family was still stunned, but something else had entered the space too. Recognition. The kind that arrives after shock. The kind that says, maybe this was always there and we were the last to see it. Your soulmate saw that shift. They saw it and kept going, because once truth begins, it does not like to be interrupted. You'll understand soon, they told their family, that you were never a passing thought. Never a distraction. Never a name they could simply forget. They said you were the one person who made them question the life they had built around silence. That sentence alone changed the weight of everything. Because now it was not just about feelings. It was about what those feelings had already done to their life from the inside out. And that kind of confession is never small. It is the sound of an old wall beginning to crack. Another layer. One family member finally asked whether you even knew any of this. That question hung in the air like a candle in a dark room. Your soulmate did not answer right away. Their face changed first. Their eyes softened. Then they said something so quiet that everyone had to lean in to hear it. They said, "I do not think they know how often I have been trying to come back to them." And with that one line, the whole room understood there was still more to the story than anyone had seen. The biggest truth is still hidden. Maybe you can feel why this matters. It is not only because someone confessed your name. It is because the confession came from a place of surrender. Not performance. Not control. Not a plan to impress. Surrender. The kind that happens when a person gets tired of losing their own heart to fear. The kind that happens when the truth becomes stronger than the habit of hiding. That is why the room was stunned. They were not hearing a rumor. They were hearing a soul finally become plain. You'll understand soon, and still, there was more. Your soulmate confessed that they had spoken about you in places the family had never been invited to enter. In private prayers. In long nights. In moments when the noise of life fell away and only one name remained. Yours. They said there were times they felt ashamed of how much they cared. Because caring that deeply had made them vulnerable in ways they did not know how to control. But shame could not erase love. It could only delay its voice. Another piece, then one older relative said something that changed the room again. They said, "You have never spoken like this about anyone else." That was the moment the whole family saw it clearly. This was not casual. This was not convenience. This was not a feeling that came and went with the weather. This was the kind of love that presses on the heart until the heart answers back. Your soulmate did not smile. They almost cried. And in that, my beloved child, something happened last night, and it was not a small thing. It was not a passing thought. It was the kind of moment that changes the air in a room before anyone even knows why. Your soulmate stood in front of their family and finally said your name like it mattered. Like it had always mattered. And the words that followed left the whole room still. Not angry. Not loud. Just stunned. Because once the truth left their lips, there was no way to pretend it had never lived there. The question now is not whether they feel it. The question is what happens when love is spoken too late. You'll understand soon, there are moments in life when silence feels safe. People hide inside it. They build walls out of it. They call it strength when it is really fear wearing a calm face. But last night, that wall cracked. Your soulmate did something they never thought they would do. They told their family that what they feel for you is not a game, not a phase, not a fleeting wish that can be brushed away in the morning. They told them that you are the one person they cannot forget. And that truth landed like a quiet storm. Another layer is still hidden. Maybe you have been waiting for a sign that you were never just a passing chapter. Maybe you have wondered why this connection felt so deep even when the distance between you seemed so wide. Tonight, that question begins to breathe. Because when someone finally speaks your name with their whole heart, the world has to answer back somehow. But it does not always answer fast. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it tests the heart that just chose honesty. The biggest truth is still hidden. Their family did not expect it. That was the part that shook the room. They thought this was something temporary. Something that would fade if ignored long enough. But your soulmate did not back down. They spoke with a kind of trembling courage that only comes when a heart is tired of pretending. They said your presence changed them. They said your absence hurt more than they could explain. They said your love, even if unspoken, had already become part of their life. And then the room went quiet in a way that said everything. Another piece is still waiting. Do you know what makes this so powerful? It was not the words alone. It was the risk behind them. To admit love to family is one thing. To admit the truth of you, that is something else. That is where pride falls apart. That is where fear has to sit down and listen. And when your soulmate told the truth, they were not trying to win an argument. They were trying to stop living a half-life. They were trying to say, this matters. This person matters. I cannot keep hiding this anymore. You'll understand soon, and maybe, somewhere deep in your chest, you have felt this before. That strange pull. That soft ache. That sense that something unfinished still follows your name. You may have thought it was only hope. But hope has a way of becoming real before we are ready to call it that. Last night was proof that even the strongest fear can break when love keeps knocking. Yet after the confession came another silence, and that silence changed everything again. Another layer, their family did not answer right away. That is what makes this so hard to hold. No one rushed to comfort them. No one rushed to reject them either. They just stared, trying to catch up to the truth that had been placed in front of them. Because once a hidden love becomes spoken, it cannot be put back in the dark. It stands there. Alive. Exposed. Waiting. And in that waiting, something deeper started to rise. The biggest truth is still hidden. You may think the hardest part is the confession itself. It is not. The hardest part is what comes after the truth is finally known. Will they protect it? Will they question it? Will they fear it because it is real? That is the edge your soulmate is standing on now. Not in shame. In courage. And that courage did not arrive by accident. It came from every late night, every silent thought, every moment they chose your memory over their comfort. Another piece is still waiting. Before I continue, if this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks. Only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. There is something tender about a heart that finally stops hiding. It becomes fragile for a moment. Then it becomes stronger than before. Your soulmate knows that now. They know that once you speak what is real, you cannot go back to living as if it was never there. And that is why the room felt so heavy. Not because of anger. Because everyone could feel the weight of something sacred being carried into the open. Another layer is still hidden. Somewhere in that house, a clock kept ticking. A cup may have sat untouched. A door may have stayed half open. But no one was thinking about small things anymore. They were thinking about the impossible thing that had just happened. They were thinking about you. About the person whose name kept returning to the same mouth that had tried so hard to stay quiet. And when a name returns like that, it means the heart has already made its choice. The biggest truth is still hidden. What they said about you was not loud praise. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of truth that makes people stop and look at a person differently. They said you made them feel seen. They said you made honesty feel safe. They said you were not just someone they loved. You were someone who changed the shape of their life. That is why everyone froze. Because those words do not come from nowhere. They come from a soul that has been changed. You'll understand soon, and still, the real question hangs in the air. What did their family do when they heard it? Did they soften? Did they challenge it? Did they ask the kind of questions that make a heart shake? That part has not fully opened yet. Not because it does not matter. Because the story is not finished choosing its next breath. Sometimes truth arrives first. Understanding follows later. And waiting can feel like standing at the edge of dawn. Another piece is still waiting. If you have ever loved someone from a distance, you know how heavy an unsaid truth can become. You know how often a heart can rehearse a moment that never comes. But last night was not rehearsal. It was real. It was the first honest step out of hiding. And that step has a way of changing everything around it, even if no one can name the change yet. The air is different now. The path is different now. The biggest truth is still hidden. Your soulmate did not confess because they suddenly became fearless. They confessed because holding it in had become harder than facing the truth. That is what love can do. It breaks down the walls we built to stay safe. It whispers through the fear. It asks for one more brave moment. And sometimes one brave moment is enough to shake an entire family into silence. Another layer, there was a point last night when your soulmate almost stopped. They felt the room close in. They felt every eye on them. They felt the old fear rise up and say, "Be quiet. Sit down. Do not make this harder." But then your name came back to them. Not as a memory. As a promise. And that promise gave them the strength to keep speaking. That is the part that stays with a person forever. The truth is still unfolding. Now think about that for a moment. Someone who once hesitated is now the one carrying the heaviest truth. Someone who once stayed silent is now the one refusing to hide you. That kind of shift does not happen in a single breath. It happens because love has been working quietly under the surface for a long time. You just could not see it yet. The path was being built in secret. Another piece is still waiting. Maybe that is why this feels so personal. Because it is not just about a confession to family. It is about what happens when a heart stops denying its own light. It is about the moment fear loses power. It is about the deep, quiet relief that comes when a soul finally says, "This is real, and I cannot keep pretending otherwise." That relief may not have reached you yet, but it is moving toward you now. You'll understand soon, and there is still more. Because after the confession, after the stunned silence, after the family tried to make sense of what they heard, your soulmate did something even more powerful. They did not try to take the words back. They did not dress them up. They did not shrink them. They stood in that truth. That is where the story turned sacred. Not because it became easy. Because it became honest. Another layer is still hidden. So what does this mean for you now? It means something inside the unseen has already shifted. A decision has been made, even if it has not been announced. A heart has crossed a line it can no longer pretend never existed. And the next part of the story depends on whether love will be allowed to grow in the open, or whether it must first survive one more test of patience. That answer is near, but not yet revealed. The biggest truth is still hidden. The room last night may have gone quiet, but quiet does not mean empty. Quiet means the soul is listening. Quiet means the moment is too important for noise. And right there, in that quiet, your soulmate may have finally understood something they had been avoiding for far too long. They may have understood that loving you was never the mistake. Hiding that love was the pain. Another piece is still waiting. There is a kind of mercy in truth. It hurts when it first arrives, but it also frees the heart from carrying a lie. That is what last night began. A release. A breaking open. A step toward a life that no longer has to split itself in two. One side for the world. One side for you. No more split. No more mask. No more pretending the heart feels less than it.